Good evening. Welcome to the world tonight. It is March 26, 2021. I'm joined with Adam and our usual special co-host who when he can actually survive. Joins us, Paris. We have a loaded show. We have an announcement at the end of the show, so stay put. But anyway, we go to our first topic, the thing that is consistent now, it seems, in daily life, an election in Israel that is indecisive, as always. And I'll let Adam, our Asia Lex guru, explain the results and what the hell actually happened.
Okay, so let's try and go for this like the traditional style you go when you're covering an election. Who was the winner? Who was the loser? And, what can we make out of this entire mess? So let's start out with who are the real losers in this election, because there are a lot. Let's start, first of all, with Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party. Now, Netanyahu in this election was trying to seek out a decisive victory in which he would finally get a stable majority for himself, in which he could sort of, widen the divide that is constantly seems to be growing between him and his opposition. And it seemed like, maybe there was something favorable going on here. He had his own party, which was, doing quite stable. You had obviously his ultra-Orthodox Haredi party supporting him. They looked pretty stable in polls. And then you also had the religious Zionist party and Yamina on his right, being there, to possibly swoop in and give him that, final bit of support that he needed. But as always seems to happen with Israeli elections recently, he has not been given the 61 seats needed that would be required to form a majority. So Likud is a real loser in this election because they lost seats and votes. So they dropped down 6 seats comparing their results in 2020, and they actually are consistently losing votes. They've lost about 300,000 votes from the first election in 2019 in April to now. So obviously Likud is sort of draining support. So there's a real sort of major loser here in that election. There are some other losers though. Let's just go straight to Benny Gantz's Blue and White Party. In the previous election, they had, achieved a pretty respectable 15 seats. Along with their coalition partners, they equaled about, I think it was around, let me just check quickly, 33 seats. So Benny Gantz led a party, 33 seats. Incredible sort of result in the previous election. Obviously went higher in prior elections, but has dropped all the way down to 8 seats. So a huge loss in that regard. Though still in the Knesset, so, a silver lining there. And yeah, just some of the real other final loser is Gideon Saar's New Hope Party. So Gideon Saar, and also I'll include Yamina in this. So Gideon Saar and also Naftali Bennett of the Yamina Party, when they first launched their parties, they had incredible success in polls. They went into the low to mid 20s with Yamina going all the way up to 25 seats when Likud was on 29. So nearly challenging them on that sort of precipice. And then also you have Gideon Saar. When he initially launched his party, he was polling at a high of 20 seats. So this is somebody who has gone from polling at a high of 20 seats all the way down to 6 seats. He only really closely scaped being one of the smallest parties, but was luckily saved by Meretz and Ram on his side. So let's go to who the real winners of this election are, because there are quite a few. So the real major winners, I guess, for this election is the Islamist or Arab interest Ram party. So Ram is a former sort of member of Joint List, who sort of was another loser of this election as they lost major support. And they set out themselves as saying, we want the Arab minority in Israel to actually have a part of government. And so that was the whole point of them breaking away from the Joint List, who they saw as sort of, crying from the backbenches of the Knesset. And ultimately, it seems like what he wanted, that being Mansour Abbas, who is the leader of Ram, is going to get, because ultimately the 4 seats that he won is going to be crucial for forming the next government, whether that's with Benjamin Netanyahu or that's with a possibly different bloc, the so-called change bloc now that wants to get rid of Bibi. So there is some other good news. for, maybe if you're interested on the left wing or if you sound left wing, the Zionist left in this election, that being the party of Labour and Meretz, actually overperformed what would be expected of them. Labour under Merav Michaeli achieved 7 seats, sort of around what she was polling, but Meretz was able to achieve 6 seats, and they were sort of only polling at around 4, very close what would be expected of that electoral threshold. So the Zionist left did pretty great in this election. And, the rest of the parties that I haven't yet mentioned have sort of, they did okay-ish, but, nothing beyond too many expectations. So the real question is now, what the heck is next? Because that is the question with any Israeli elections results. And the real answer is there doesn't seem to be one. There are a number of, things blocking any kind of government. So let's start with Benjamin Netanyahu. If he wanted to form a government with members of the Knesset that are explicitly for his faction, then he would only get to around 57 seats. So to get to that 61 seat, he would need the Islamist Ra'am. And now the issue here is that the Religious Zionist Party, which is made up of sort of what I'd call proto-fascist from the Otzma Yehudit party, sort of homophobes and real extreme Jewish theocrats, really, they will not accept having Islamists in their coalition, as you'd expect from people who have said they want to, kick out disloyal Arabs from Israel. So there is a real issue there for Benjamin Netanyahu, because ultimately he can't lose the 6 seats from Religious Zionist Party just to make up for the 4 seats that the Ra'am are going to give him. So there's a big issue there. But let's go on to the other side now, the change bloc. That would be a whole mess of a coalition, because the New Hope, led by Gideon Sa'ar, despite the fact he ultimately struck out in this election, his 6 seats would be needed to form any kind of coalition. And another major partner that they'd need, that being the Joint List and Ra'am, they said they wouldn't sit with them because, they don't think it's appropriate to sit with extreme Arabs. So, yeah, it's all over the place. No real answer. That's just the real analysis of things. The way it's looking now is the president of Israel has, I think it's next week, they will decide who they want to go around to each party, say, who do you want to recommend to be prime minister? Whoever gets the most amount of recommendations will then be the one who puts themselves forward and tries to form a coalition. Then it goes to the person who got the second most. And then finally, it goes to any member of the Knesset that thinks they can form any kind of government. So we have a long time ahead of us in terms of any kind of government formation. I think there is a very, very strong chance that they will have another election, that being a 5th election, one after the other. But one final note, just to lead this on before I pass along to my fellow hosts here, just to see their comments, is that Yisrael Beitenu, led by Avigdor Lieberman, he has set out a plan in which he would see the parties that dislike Benjamin Netanyahu, including Ra'am, they would pass legislation which means that an indicted politician cannot become prime minister, therefore forcing Likud, obviously with Benjamin Netanyahu and his indictments, they would force Likud to pick a new leader, and hopefully after all of this, Likud, once they are rid of Benjamin Netanyahu, would finally have a way to progress in the future. So, that is the Israeli election as a whole. We've been waiting on it for a while. As expected, didn't really bring much. But there we are.
Terrace?
Again, it's like the one constant in pandemic world and all this has just been, indecisiveness in the Israeli elections. Again, with Avigdor Lieberman's, saying, hey, let's pass this law and maybe this will get us somewhere. That's personally, I'm not even sure that could happen, because trying to get all these different parties to agree on even doing that seems like it would be a tall task. And Benjamin Netanyahu I almost want to call him like Teflon Ben or something like that, because, you throw all these elections on him and he's still able to find his way to cling to power somehow. So this is really what it's really turning out to be. Yes, nature is healing. Is Israel not having an election in a year? That's a great meme now to have. But yeah, I mean, literally, it's just more indecisiveness. Who knows if there'll be another election or not? It's Israel. It's politics. Anything can happen.
That is, of course, indeed true. Now, on my thoughts of Israel, first off, of course, per usual, the Israeli exit polls got it wrong at the initial stage. So no fun, get health warning next time if we do get Israeli election 5. Please do not listen to the original exit polls and clog up feeds about saying what they mean, because they tend to be wrong. As we saw, Netanyahu was going to get a majority, and now indecisiveness. Now, on the election result, I mean, Likud did what was expected. 30 was sort of what most final polls had them, so no real shock there. I think one of the more interesting aspects was blue and white. I mean, most polling had them right on the line, or just 4 or 5 seats. They had a healthy 8. Yes, it's down from what they had at the last election. Part of that, of course, is the fact that the blue and white faction did blow up because of Benny Gantz's very questionable political instincts to go jump in bed with Netanyahu.
Just as a quick, just as a final note on this, actually, just because it is the most fascinating thing, right? So, Benny Gantz technically becomes Prime Minister of Israel in late November, as per the coalition agreement that was set out way back last year. So essentially, if there is no government that is formed until then, and Benny Gantz actually stays in the Knesset after the presumably the latest an election could be, which is the 7th of November, we can presume he would stay above the threshold. Maybe that's an incorrect assumption, but that's just my insight into that. Mm-hmm. And if he gets it past that, then on the in late November, he becomes Prime Minister, or at least caretaker Prime Minister. So maybe those astute observations aren't technically that incorrect, because maybe he oversees all this. But no, it would be fascinating. It would be fascinating to me if the person that unseats Netanyahu from his sort of 13-year reign is Benny Gantz, which maybe would have been expected last year, but definitely not. Sorry, 2 years ago, but definitely not last year.
Yes, it would be quite a hilarious meme. You go in and but sort of piss off your voters, but at the end of the day, you get to be prime minister for a few months. Exactly. The pension works at the end of the day. A generous pensions package comes Mr. Gantz's way. But back to the actual thing. Besides that, the religious parties, the Shas, the United Torah, Judaism, and whatnot, all did what was expected. I mean, Labor had a very good performance with its new leader. She very much energized them to have one of their better performances they've had in some time. So 7 seats for them is on the uptick, and the Israeli left, well, a disappointing result overall, is still very much having a bit of a fight back after about a decade of in the wilderness. Gideon Sa'ar, I should say, real big loser. I mean, to start off with 20 some odd seats, to break from Likud and say I'm the fresh Likud just without Bibi, and to crash to 7, just really pathetic. Also should note that you should never hire Lincoln Project affiliated people to run elections, because you will just lose miserably. And now, Sa'ar is just a puppet bag of what not to do in politics. But now he becomes interesting to see what will happen in that regard. And the others, I mean, Naftali Bennett, was supposed to be this kingmaker, obviously isn't now. He's kind of, let's say, irrelevant in this discussion for the most part. Only 7 seats when he was polling in the mid-10s, the high teens, also really pathetic result. And for the Arabs, always interesting. Ram was, on the middle. It looked like a good chunk of the night they weren't going to get in, but they did. And the joint list, their fellow compatriots suffered as a result of that loss of them going down, which was expected, but not maybe as badly as they did, which now sets up this interesting dynamic of what Abbas decides to do with this new 5 MPs he's been gifted from the Arab electorate in terms of what he does with passing bills. Does he join along the Lieberman idea of convicting Bibi? As Taris mentioned, that's going to be a very tall order to get everyone to jump in and agree to that, because others may think, maybe not sign this because I could maybe be prime minister one day, and I don't want this to become a precedent for me if I'm under criminal investigation. But that's interesting. Also, we'll know, since we mentioned the Israeli president. Fun fact, Israel's presidency is also due for a change of the guard this summer. So very likely the current president, President Levin, may very well not be the one who formally ends this. Someone else may be doing that.
Yep. And we have the whole mess of this current Knesset, which is already as divided as possible, having to try and figure out. So you never know. Maybe we'll have some kind of fun, independent, trying to represent civil society and trying to bring everyone back together.
Hey, we've already had 4 candidates enough that want the job, so why not?
I'm just thinking of a great. I think that Albert Einstein said this when he was offered I'm not sure if this is true, but at the very least,
yes, it was.
It was true. Yeah, he was offered the presidency of Israel, and he said, "No, thanks. I don't have the head for problems."
And this is in 52.
Yeah.
But yes, I think Arkalik does nail something, though, and I do think some people on the site called Twitter seem to like to admit this, but Netanyahu, of course, has been here a long time, and people who have underestimated Bibi tend to write their political death sentences in a lot of places. Now, we could very well see the end of Netanyahu in the fall. Who knows? But
I'm just saying, if he didn't die, or at least his political career didn't die when, I believe it was 2009 election when Kadima completely steamrolled Likud and crushed him down to about 13 seats, and he somehow still survived and rose to power once again, then I don't think anything is really going to beat Bibi Tapa. Who knows? That's the future.
He beat 2 Israeli legends, one Perez to get the job the first time, and then Sharon, who had the ultimate laugh at him.
Exactly.
That so always fun to see. We'll see what happens. But Israeli 5 election, if I had to be a betting man, probably will happen, and Israelis will have to deal with another election, and probably more at Bibi, having fun times with reporters snapping at them, trying to be very Trumpian. But hey, why not? And maybe poor Yorash, this time doesn't get told by everyone you can't be prime minister, one by one. But anyway, moving on to other fun things. Our resident Slovak is here who can explain what the name of God is happening in Slovakia.
Again, it's, we just have yet to have a government in Slovakia. The last government in Slovakia that didn't have problems with corruption or a governmental crisis was elected in, I want to say 2002. And that would have been when, I forget his name. Mikuláš Dzurinda was elected became prime minister of Slovakia. For reference, he led the initial economic bounce of Slovakia after exiting, after the dissolution of Czechoslovakia and all that. So really way far as back, because you've had Iveta Radičová, who corruption brought her government down. Robert Fico, where you had the whole reporter getting assassinated under his watch. Peter Pellegrini, still kind of seen as close to Fico. Yes, I don't. I'll explain the Slovak part later. But anyways, so now here we are. Igor Matovic came into this thinking, I'm going to root out corruption. That's been his shtick the whole time since he's been a member of parliament, since he's been a party leader. COVID's done a number on him and his government and his governing style. He governs off of Facebook, kind of a la what Donald Trump does with that. And it's just caused a great mess because with the communication, then trying to bring in Sputnik vaccines, that has kind of pushed the edge over for the Freedom and Solidarity Party, SAS. They're wanting to leave. They have left the coalition effectively until Igor Matovic resigns. Zaludi, another coalition partner, is telling Matovic, if you don't resign by Monday, new elections, we're not doing a 3-party coalition, because the current coalition has a what's called a constitutional majority, so over 90 seats, so they can pass amendments fairly easily. But a simple majority is just 75 in the current parliament. However, Zaludi's like, we want SAS in here. If they're not in here, we're out of the coalition. Smerodina, we are families just trying to pipe everyone down and like, hey, do stuff. Let's, get this problem solved. it's not happening. Even the president's telling the prime minister to resign. Even now, it's word is if Montovic resigns, there are going to be members of the Olano Nova caucus who are going to go out. No one knows which MP said it, so who knows if the threat's credible or not. So that's just a giant mess. It's just all a giant mess. If this ends in an election, this is going to be like Israel 2.0 because current polls suggest that there is going to be no formable majority out of all the parties that would make it into parliament.
And it's Fico looking for a political revival as well.
Yeah, it's just weird. Although current polling does put the fascists out of the parliament, which is very nice to hear. Very nice to see that Slovaks are finally like regaining some normalcy when it comes to politics. Though after however many years of Vladimir Mečiar and Robert Fico, Slovak politics are never going to be the same until a generation of politicians without their influence goes away. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of everything going on there. So yeah, it's just a giant mess between Sputnik. All the ministers have resigned. The foreign ministers resigned. It's a stalemate. We'll see what happens come Monday, but I highly doubt, given the thick heads of everyone, nothing's going to happen. So
you think there will be no resignation of the government or no elections this year?
I think there will be elections this year. I just think that Montovic is not going to resign. He has too much pride in himself. Mm-hmm. And that's a big thing is, Zuzana Chaputova, Andrej Kiska, the two former prime ministers, even Ivan Gasparovic and Rudolf Schuster, and pretty much all the presidents of Slovakia in the past, they haven't had sort of this big personality. Mm-hmm. Whereas you've had the prime ministers had this big personality. And so it's played off in the younger leaders to this point right now. So it's just created this giant egomaniac mess. So they all, no one wants to chicken out and do the good thing. They just want to stay in power. And it's just it's not good. And, the government's been handling COVID like a mess. So yeah, that's pretty much how we're in this mess now. So, I know I'm looking here, yeah, the polling's just all over the place. The Hungarians are right around that threshold. If they get into parliament, that's where the real fun begins because we've had, I think, we've had a parliament now without a Hungarian party in there, and dynamics have been interesting. It's also causing some issues with a law that the Slovaks want to get passed to let an Irish foreign citizenship similar deal to occur. So,
Irish foreign citizenship.
So there is a deal similar to what Ireland has, where if you're a descendant of a citizen of Slovakia or something like that, you gain automatic citizenship. They're talking about doing that. The problem is the Hungarians have been threatening to do that for the past 20 years or so, and it's just to Hungarians in Slovakia, and yeah, it's not fun at all.
So that was a perfect sort of summary of a situation that, as a person who loves European politics, I'm not actually that aware of. So I apologize for that. So it seemed like the main thing that was really driving this was the purchase of Sputnik vaccines.
Yes.
Or at least, so what was the real driving force behind the government thinking this was a good idea?
It was just Montovic being like, oh, I can do stuff. I can get stuff done. I'm not going to contact any of the coalition partners, just going to purchase this. Then the visuals of him and now the former health minister being when the plane arrived from Russia at Košice airport, which is the second largest airport in the nation. The optics of that didn't go over well. Some also context, freedom and solidarity, very pro-US, pro-Europe. So anything to do with Russia, they're like, no, no, no. And they hold the foreign minister. They nominated the foreign minister. So to really have that happen, and plus there were talks of back channel, possibly even mafia dealings with this. No, just you're not going to do that in Slovak politics and expect to survive as prime minister.
Makes sense. Fair enough. Thank you very much for the answer.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, I mean, it looks like a very interesting mess that is Slovakia. It can't be said as their neighbor, the Czechs, who seem a little more stable, but that's a different, Dave Sorry the Bear.
They didn't have Mečiar. They had normal prime ministers.
Well, to be fair, the Czechs have a billionaire, version, who's maybe a little more political, businessman.
I mean, they have the possibility of having a, pirate party in government, which would be.
I mean, that's
actually
normal.
Yeah, I was going to say one of my favorite things. I just talk about the Czech pirate party, which is one of my favorites. The mayor of Prague renaming the square, or at least an area outside of the Russian embassy. Was it to someone who had been killed by the Russian state?
I think it was Navalny or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. So at least somebody who was a victim of the Russian state. I just, it's just incredible moves. But yeah, that's Czech politics. Different.
I was going to say, to explain Slovak politics in a nutshell. The first stalemate between the prime minister and the president ended in the president's son being kidnapped by the order of the prime minister. So that's pretty much, that settles it. And then you have a period of normalcy, and then you have a prime minister who may or may not have had corrupt dealings with the mafia government and may or may not have connections to the journalist that was murdered back in 2017 now. Wow, that feels like it's forever and a half ago. And then you have that, and now you have an anti-corruption prime minister who doesn't really know how to govern, trying to govern by himself, thinking he's acting as a lone person, and the coalition partners telling him no. So.
Fantastic. Thank you for that excellent summary. Is there anything else you have to add, Peter?
I only will ask Mr. Terrace. I've only just from my quick research realized that that the former Prime Minister Pellegrini, I see, has made his own party. Well, if there is a possible scenario there with Pellegrini and Fico's party, assuming Fico is nominee of his prime ministership, whether they would work together or whether there's still some bad blood in that regard.
That whole party formed because of bad blood between the two. Because Pellegrini was the prime minister and Fico wasn't giving up the reins on who controlled the party. And Fico's very much a left-wing nationalist, and Pellegrini's center-left, not as much of a nationalist. So he kind of comes off a little differently, but he still is tainted because he was affiliated with the former ruling party. And so they're not going to work together at all. You're not going to see anyone touch the fascists with a 95.5-foot pole. They refuse to do that. Depending on if Matovic is still around, that's going to mean bad blood between him and Richard Sulik and his Freedom and Solidarity Party. I mean, just looking at the seat numbers and all that, there is no possible government that will form. It's
a mess.
Yes. It is going to be a constant mess because based on the interactions of the party leaders, it would be it would take a miracle to get them to cooperate. So,
and to our Kellic, I only asked the question just because of the chaos that may happen at the next election, just because of the scenarios of those two. Obviously, as Terrace has now illustrated, there's bad blood, which probably means people don't want to sit each other at the table. So this is why you always have a Slovak expert to do this. So,
no, it's just everything's a mess. I mean, if there is a coalition that I see could form, it would be like, it would have to be a neutral prime minister be nominated. And even then, it's not going to get you 90 seats. It's going to get you like 70 plus, which isn't going to do you really that well when trying to deal with COVID, because they need that 90 plus really to do the COVID measures too. So,
Kellic mentioned Draghi style, but anyway, moving on. There's some news out of the Middle East. Adam.
Yes, so we're going to Yemen, a real hotbed of conflict for the last 7 years. Just to talk about, the Saudi Arabia offering the Iran-backed Houthis rebels a ceasefire. It was on the, I believe, 20th when they offered this ceasefire, but it's been roundly rejected by the rebel group. So they rejected the offer of a ceasefire on the grounds that Saudi Arabia would have to lift its blockade over the rebel group's ports, and something that Saudi Arabia has rejected. So just as a brief overview, Yemen has been in conflict and continuous conflict for about 7 years now. It's a devastating civil war that seems unlikely to end anytime soon. Especially, this offer of peace doesn't seem to be something that'll bring it to a close. So this sort of offer of peace is based upon a UN plan for the country, which was proposed a while back. And it essentially boils down to having a UN-supervised ceasefire, the lifting of trade restrictions on the Saudi-backed government-controlled ports, and subsequent talks between the two sides to try and work out some kind of government. So the real reason why this fell apart is in the details. So according to Peter Salisbury from the International Crisis Group, the Houthis wanted Hodeidah port, which is a real major port in Yemen, and Sana'a airport to be completely open to all international traffic. The Saudi proposal envisioned a role for the Yemeni government in regulating both, and that's really where the conflicts came about, is they didn't want to have, the actual government which they were fighting against having, any kind of role in this, in terms of actually regulating them. And so the Houthis have basically said that the Saudis are prioritizing, sort of economic focuses before humanitarian focuses, which is what the UN has stated is the major issue in the region, primarily relating to the famine which has been raging in the country. And also just general lack of medical supplies, lack of access to water, that general thing. The other interesting thing to note is that the UN plan had a proposal which would suggest the sharing of revenues on trade and oil through data between the two sides, which is something that the Houthis did envision, but coupled with the other things, it meant it's not something that could actually work out in the end. So basically what experts have said is that this real idea of peace that the Saudis are presenting here is one in which they are making no real concessions. It's something that the Houthis is something that they have to put forward instead. And this is really why the Houthis have rejected it, because they think that they're in a strong enough position to say, we're actually going to continue this civil war because we're, quote unquote, winning it. This primarily comes from the fact that there have been attacks from Yemen across to Saudi Arabia by Houthis forces, which has struck southern Saudi Arabia and oil processing facilities in the region, which has hurt the Saudi economy. And there's also been the fact that the Houthis have intensified their attacks in recent months and weeks on Marib, which is a oil-rich town and of the UN-recognized government in Yemen, and is their real last stronghold in northern Yemen. Their primary base of support seems to be the south. The real sort of focus as a whole is what does the United States think on this all? And the Biden administration wants to see an end to the Yemeni civil war, primarily for humanitarian reasons. It's why they withdrew their military support for Saudi-led forces fighting there, and suspended some arms sales to Saudi Arabia. And then the US has also tried to sort of bring the two sides together by revoking its designation of the Houthis as a terrorist organization, which is something Trump did as sort of a final last hurrah. What this sort of suggests is that the United States is trying to bring an end to a conflict, which also has the other edge of it, of them trying to show to Iran, who is backing the Houthis, that they're willing to cooperate and end a conflict that they have a major presence in. It's one of the many ways that the United States is attempting to revive the 2015 nuclear deal with Iran. Do either of you have any thoughts?
Very good rundown. I see you also have a friend in the chat. I'm not going to make assumptions who that person is. But anyway, Taras. Which has experiences with friends as well.
I mean, again, it's just trying to deal with proxy war, well, possible proxy war. Yeah, it would be a proxy war by Iran with the Houthis, right?
It is.
Yeah, it is. I'm going to hold my breath at any sort of ceasefire and peace deal that occurs until actually, the paper is signed and it really happens. I mean, the offer sounds nice, but there's probably not going to be an end of this in the near future, or even in the far future, quite possibly, which is quite unfortunate for the region, given all of the humanitarian concerns of what has happened in Yemen concerning famine and just the lack of supplies getting to the displaced people in the region.
Indeed. Yes, Bucky Girl, and that's who I'm referring to. Apologies if that's not the case. But anyway, on the point of Yemen, yes, it's a very disastrous situation that is occurring to the people of Yemen since 2015. The humanitarian crisis, the lack of food, the malnutrition, the disease is just horrific. Whatever, as Archela put it eloquently, whatever our views on this are. That's the overall thing. I'm not surprised Saudi Arabia is offering this because it just saves them force, because the Yemen's become their own quagmire, because there's really no end in sight for them. But yeah, I mean, the Houthis have been closing in. They've been attacking Saudi oil facilities of Aramco, really with force and really not with any fear at all. So yeah, I don't see this ending it very peacefully. I still think, I want to start saying this, but the Houthis have very much done what they've had to do in terms of territory. The UN-backed government is already kind of closing on its heels of being able to do anything. And the Biden administration has already sent mixed signs on what its real Iran strategy is. I mean, they have said that they want to renegotiate the deal. They removed the late Trump decision on the Houthis' terrorist designation to allow for more food. But at the same time, they said that they will not allow Iran to potentially play the United States as a fool, as Anthony Blinken said a few weeks ago in a House Foreign Affairs Committee hearing. So it's an interesting thing to see where the U.S. is actually going to stand on this. And I mean, for Saudi Arabia, this is also important. They didn't win the first standoff against Iran. It's really, going to be interesting to see what Saudi policymakers decide, because this is not going to be the end of the proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. This is just the continuation of probably something that's going to grow and grow as there is more and more of a pressure on Iran to scale down its nuclear program, which may or may not, depending on a future American president, go very hot.
Fantastic analysis there. I just want to make a quick correction on what I said. When I said that the government was strongly in the south, what I meant was the southwest. There we go.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway. So yeah, thank you for the comment there. I think the real interesting thing as well is that the Saudis have no real. What would the word be? Obviously, the incentive is still there to try and achieve some kind of actual peace, specifically with the Houthis. But to be fair, there, as Taras pointed out, there's no real sort of, goal that could come out of it. It would just be a very, bogged down negotiations, which we're really seeing no end to them. But who knows? It will be interesting to see what role the United States plays in trying to push this forward and trying to actually achieve something out of it. But this is all seems to be sort of a part of the wider plan to try and get some kind of renegotiated nuclear deal with Iran, which is sort of how I see America's role here.
Indeed, it'll be interesting to see whether they can get that deal passed, or whether Iran has long stopped caring about this and is continually on the path of nuclear capacity, especially with the fact that the hardliners in Iran are very much a powerful force increasingly now because of the last few years. But moving on in the same region, we move to the Suez Canal. Yes, a canal that has been blockaded for a few days now because a tanker that was bigger than the dimensions of the canal got stuck, bringing international trade in, I believe, the world's busiest canal to a grinding halt. And Adam can tell us the story.
Yep, the Ever Given, which is the name of the ship, it's a huge container ship that's completely blocked up the Suez Canal, and it is still currently there, and it looks like it will be there for quite a while, or at least a few weeks, depending on the situation. So the Suez Canal, as I imagine many of you probably already know, is very important. About 12% of global trade passes through it, and it cuts down the journey which the Ever Given was going on from Taiwan to the Netherlands from about 25.5 days, from 34 days if it was to go around the Cape of Good Hope, which would be the sort of alternative route, to 25.5 days. So it's a major thing. Currently, the fact that it's being stuck there costs $400 million an hour. So it's already cost billions of dollars. And it will take weeks to move. And I think that's, the only real thing to sort of just comment on it, that it is very expensive. And, maybe next time, if you ever find yourself driving a ship through the Suez Canal, all of our wonderful listeners, don't get it stuck in the Suez Canal, or it will really cost you.
Yes, and also the fact that if you've seen on Twitter, there's fun little maps. The amount of ships that are just waiting to get into the canal, it's just a whole mess of the entire entry port waiting, and that's global trade. Goods that are waiting to head mostly to Europe, being stuck there, and I'm sure, and also vice versa, of ships from Europe that need to get to Asia, also stuck in the Mediterranean to get in. Now, of course, with this, there's been a meme. The meme, of course, being Anthony Eden's lovely face being brought back into this, because we all know Britain, loved its former, possession of the Suez Canal. That it was time for a tango of Britain, France, and Israel to go back into the canal. Of course, this is just a joke.
To be fair, Dominic Raab, the British Foreign Secretary, did offer, the British support. Doesn't seem like it's been taken. Maybe for those historical reasons, though.
Yes, historical reasons that certain Brits I know are still angry at America for certain things. But that's a different story for a different day. But yes, overall, it is quite a meme to see, what is happening. And to the question, I think if you're asking about Biden, the canal, no comment from the White House, even at his press conference the other day. Maybe he just doesn't watch, the news there. But
sorry, well, you were probably going to say what they were going to do.
They said that if they needed to, the U.S. would be gladly willing to offer some aid to help get the boat out of the mess there.
Yeah, the U.S. Navy is sending dredging experts to the Suez Canal to try and sort of assist in this effort as much as possible. But to be honest, what more else is there the U.S. could do? Yeah.
I mean, it's not our former canal. I mean, if it was the Panama Canal, maybe it'd be a different story because we used to own the thing. But yeah,
I mean, if the UK actually went there, maybe the US would tell us to get out, and then it would happen a whole situation again. Oh no, can't be going through that again.
Charis, quick question before we move on to the more hot topic issue at the end of the show.
I have no idea what to say at this point. Just why.
You're the engineering major.
I'm not a civil engineer. So for reference, I'm an aerospace engineering major. I don't deal with canals, which is a civil engineering issue. And whatever happened here is just how, why, what. There are so many. Well, there are supposed to be so many safeguards in place. Yes, somebody is going to get fired. It's just a question of who and how many, because this should never have happened. And apparently, word is that the captain of this ship, it's going around on Twitter, may or may not be true. Word is the captain of the ship has gotten in hot water before for actions he's done. I can't recall what exactly at this point, but the captain has done some not so great things when it comes to following maritime procedures. So,
how lovely.
Yeah, no, this ain't fun.
Moving on stuff that is not fun, and our final topic for Loser of the Week and the other special announcement. It is the United States border crisis. Yes, folks, it's the annual U.S. border crisis has come up. Now, the new administration has had its fun, border crisis come in. since they've taken over in January. Currently, there are about 300,000 migrants who have crossed the border and now are in detention facilities that are overflowed, overcrowded, and some would argue are cages. The same thing that the previous administration was blasted on by numerous groups. Of course, the current administration has had to panic rush this because they did not expect this to become such a full-blown disaster. Their messaging this weekend was, we have moved from no one can come to certain people can come to no one should come to the U.S. at all. The administration, of course, this administration changed the previous administration's policy of all migrants had to stay in Mexico for processing, not over the U.S. Of course, now that is seen to have caused an issue. And now Mr. Biden's administration is also now facing increasing pressure to mobilize some sort of force to control what is happening at the border, because there's a genuine fear that these facilities are overcrowding, and that because a lot of these folks do not have COVID testing where they're coming from, and the human smugglers that are taking them across the border, that a full-blown humanitarian crisis is almost an inevitability. Of course, politically speaking, this has exposed a weak spot of the administration, which has enjoyed high approval ratings as of now, and could very well be an issue that could cause trouble for Democrats and the administration in terms of being able to control it. I'll let one of you two respond first to it. Adam or Terrace?
Yeah, so I don't mind. I just think that obviously the comparisons to Trump's similar border crises are apt, but I think that the only major distinction is that unaccompanied migrant children aren't being expelled under the same law, which would allow them to be turned around, which I think is, a positive thing, ensuring that unaccompanied children are actually having proper facilities provided to them as they're being presented care by the Department of Health and Human Services. But obviously, there are similarities to the Trump era in terms of the number of people coming through. So yeah, it'll just be interesting to follow along and see how this situation develops, because ultimately it's something that America seems to have constant spikes with, where there may be a few year drift, but actually it rises all the way back up. And this is especially pertinent because of the fact COVID-19 has stopped this kind of general migration. The actual number of people who have, whether this is children or just families as a whole, who actually came to the US border and tried to cross through, was sort of at a very, very low point in early 2020, and only picked up onwards. But yeah, definitely a very different situation. So yeah.
Terrace?
Yeah, this is just, it's like U.S. and border crisis. When will they not occur? At least in recent history, it seems like it's just been a continuing pattern. We were mentioning the Trump administration. This was even happening during the Obama administration, too. It's just a giant mess, especially with COVID. There's no, in terms of a good way to end this, it's a lose-lose situation for the Biden administration in terms of a political standpoint. On a political standpoint, it's lose-lose. It's either anger the base or anger the moderates. So,
and risk Republican attacks from this as well.
Yes. Well, of course, that goes without saying.
Right.
But it's just either or. Mm-hmm. Progress is not going to be fun to end this. Mm-hmm. Definitely not going to end. Will there be a good resolution to this? Probably not. Will there be a neutral resolution to this? That's the best I can hope for.
And it, of course, should be noted that immigration topics in Congress have become such a lightning rod in both parties that any deal has usually met a fate of death in one of the chambers, whether the Senate or House. The closest thing that was nearly passed was in 2017 when when congressional leaders were almost set on striking a deal of allowing for more building of border protection and E-Verify for some infrastructure money, but that collapsed at the last minute due to criticism at the White House that it wasn't harsh enough on the migrants who were illegally crossing. Of course, it should be noted that other attempts in the passage, the DREAM Act, failed in 2010 because there weren't enough Democratic senators who wanted to vote for this, or the 2006 Bush immigration reform bill that died because many Republicans didn't want to touch the issue, or the 2013 Gang of Eight bill, which also died in the House as well. Of course, there's criticisms to be made. Of course, Mexico says that Biden has not been as transparent as the previous administration has been in working with this. But of course, that's to be said. Whatever you believe of the Mexican government, again, that's your own opinions on the matter. But yes, as Terrace noted, there is a political cost to this, and the political cost for the Democrats, really Joe Biden, is failure to do nothing. It's just something that begins a potential problematic saga with more harsher things ahead, as they say, because the honeymoon period for every president inevitably runs out in one way or form. But yeah, that's my only top comments on the topic. Anyone else?
Nope. I don't care about U.S. politics. Too American centric. Got to leave that behind.
But moving on, we are now to the loser of the week, and I'll let Adam say his, then Terrace, and then I'll go last.
Okay, so my loser of the week is probably the only time we're going to get to call them a loser across the course of their election campaign. But for this week, it will be Alex Salmond, the former First Minister of Scotland and their devolved legislature. He this week has formed a new political party, the Alba Party, which seeks to only contest list seats in the AMS system of the Scottish Parliament, meaning that they have constituency seats and they also have the list to vote that people can go on. And the real reason I'm giving Salmond the loser of the week is, first of all, this is a man with a minus 60% approval rating, and I wish I had the confidence to set myself forward in British politics with a huge sort of disapproval rate. I think it's only about 14% of people in Scotland actually approve of him. And to be honest, Arcangelic puts it right. Alex Salmond was a huge loser before all of this. Whether we're talking about his Russia Today talk show, which is just okay, awful, sort of thing there. Reaching all the way to the sexual harassment and also sexual assault allegations and cases against him. And then we also have to go to the way that his conduct towards not only just politicians in general, but specifically Charles Kennedy of the Liberal Democrats. He is an awful human being. And to see him make a return to Scottish politics, where he's seeking to game the system by only contesting list seats in a hope of, if the SNP wins on constituency seats, then they'll be able to sort of bolster the independents or pro-independence parties. He's just a huge loser, and I hope that someone like him and his disgusting views on just a whole bunch of different things and what he represents, is something that's roundly rejected. But that's just my personal opinion, and I know everyone wants to hear my personal opinion.
Terrace? Yes. Oh, sorry. No. Finish up. I feel sorry for doing that.
No, of course. Terrace, go ahead.
I'm still trying to figure out a loser for the week, so Pete, you could.
So yes, my loser of the week, I alluded to him earlier in the show, is Gideon Saar. Again, do not hire the Lincoln Project to run your campaign, to go from like the mid-tier, mid-teens, or even 20-ish seats to like 7. Pathetic. You could even see on Saar's face on the election night, he knew he had effed up, lost, whatever you want to call it, because, to be from a powerful position to now 7 seats, the same seats as Labour, and just one better than Merz, it's just embarrassing for someone who said he was the new champion of the anti-Bibi right. He was going to, champion himself as being able to get Likud off the thing that is Bibi. Loser of the week. Talked big, failed miserably. Also, yes, Bennett could be in this scenario, though. To be fair, the Lincoln Project is enough to just tip the scale for Saar, because the Lincoln Project are just losers in every fashion of what they touch.
I respect it.
Terrace?
Alrighty, I have a proposal, and it's just polling, and we're kind of staying in the general European area with this one. Probably has been alluded to earlier already, but just the CDU, just how bad their polling's been. You have a leader who in Armin Laschet, who is very pro-Russian and just not very politically sound in terms of instincts. And so it's caused a lot of issues. The party's polling really well. And for the first time in quite a while, it looks like there could be a green-red-red coalition in terms of Germany's Bundestag.
The so-called traffic light coalition.
Not traffic light. It's very possible that it could be the Social Democrats, the Greens, and the left.
Oh right. Oh sorry, I misheard you there. Oh wow, yeah. I didn't realize that was the possibility there. Yeah, less likely than traffic light, because I don't think the left is something that wants to work with the Greens in Germany, who are a bit more centrist. But yeah, anyway, continue.
And the FDP has also had a lot of issues with the Greens as well. Federally.
Yeah. So it's just this interesting dynamic where it's like the Greens are very much looking like they're going to be the second party in the next Bundestag. How much of a meltdown is the CDU going to have? Who's the chancellor candidate? Because if it ends up being Markus Söder of the sister party CSU of Bavaria, it's very, very possible that the CDU-CSU power combo manages to stay in government, because Söder, polling much better, comes across better, could definitely nab some of the votes that the CDU and the CSU have lost to the, I'm going to call them fascists, the AfD. So, I mean, yeah, it depends who the candidate is, and not looking great for Angela Merkel's successor.
Well, the other thing...
So I was saying, with approval rates in, I believe it's around like the minus, or a disapproval rate of around minus 66 or something like that. So awful situation for their chancellor candidate. But yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing that doesn't help Laschet, of course, is that he was already kind of there were many within the CDU who had this exact worry back during the leadership contest that this was going to happen. Many of the Merz fans, but even a lot of Robert people, at the end of the day, voted for Merz because they just couldn't trust him. And now, Laschet's in the very awkward situation. If he loses the chancellor vote, that's a damning indictment against his leadership. To take over the party in January and be a few months later, you're not the chancellor candidate anymore, weakens his position inside. And mind you, this is already a CDU that is already kind of growing is already growing restless inside of each other. It's very clear that a lot of the CDU is tired of the Merkel years. They want a new thing. They want to be a little more right-wing. That right-wing, base of the party's membership wants more something at the table. And it's becoming clear that the party is very much running into a problem of how do you manage all these different factions? And Laschet hasn't helped his cause by very much being a weak and sometimes invisible leader who has been getting hammered on both sides. He's losing centrists to the Greens, and he's losing kind of right-leaning libertarians to the FDP.
Wow. Yep. Huge, a whole bunch of losers we have this week. But yes, brings to the final thing.
Yes, which I've dreaded to have to bring the subject on, but I'll let Adam make the announcement of what's going to occur.
So, after, I can't imagine that it has actually been this long. It feels like so much longer of, what was it, half a year doing the World Tonight? Doing the World Tonight. Starting, in the real peak of lockdown for myself, or at least, where I didn't have much to do. I will be stepping down from being the co-host of the World Tonight. I have a bunch of other stuff that I'm doing individually in my life, and also A-levels at school are taking up a lot of my time. So having this sort of designated hour every evening where I have to do a bunch of research is just, taking away from it. But it has been a wonderful, wonderful time. And I'm so glad that I've been able to make the wonderful friend Peter here, who's really, grown this along with me. And it's something that's really improved my confidence as well in just presenting in front of a camera and letting people know in real time. So if I do mess up, it's major, about things across the world. So yeah, it's it's going to be the end for the War Tonight for me. I hope I can come back to it one day. But Peter, I think you're still continuing it along. You're going to keep the show going.
Yes. First, before I say anything else, it's been a pleasure to have Adam as a great co-host. It's been a pleasure to do this in the last year with him. It would be very sad to see him go, but we have a lot of good things ahead. Of course, this show will continue on. I will try doing the best I can to keep it going. We'll try to have a variation of new co-hosts if that is possible. I know Terrace, if scheduling could work, will possibly be one of those co-hosts, but that remains to be seen.
Yeah.
But yes, it's been a pleasure to have worked with Adam. It's a shame it's happening, but things have to happen. I look forward to trying to keep this program running and hopefully being able to reach the 1 year anniversary, and we'll have a lot of fun regardless of what happens, and it will be whatever its journey is. If life is its own journey, of course, this is not a goodbye. This is just a moving on, as they say.
So it's such a beautiful and poignant moment for a live stream, which I never expected to get from this kind of thing. But no, it has been so much fun, and yeah, I hope it keeps going really well. And you know what? Maybe if there is that 5th Israeli election, then I can come on and talk about it a bit. But yeah.
Any thoughts you'd like to add, Terrace, before we close the show?
I mean, I'm probably the guest host that's, been here a bunch of times, and so I know how it is, with Pete and Adam, and just kind of seeing the, change going on. It's really, I know it's going to continue on, but it's not going to feel the same without you here, Adam. So I wish you well in all your academics. I know how that feels myself. So again, just best of luck, and hope the A levels go. And no, 5 elections are enough.
Yeah, 6th election coming up next. Looking forward to it.
Hopefully the 6th election is a 4-year period for Israelis to relax and enjoy other fun things in life. But anyway,
we're going for 6. Let's just go for 7. Get the nice number.
7 number is great. Anyway, follow us on Twitter or Spotify or whatever podcasts you have, and I will let Adam, for being his last show, close it all.
Remember, everyone, to get your vaccines if they're offered to you. Have a very safe and wonderful week, and tune in next time, where maybe I won't be here, but Peter will still continue on providing you with that excellent coverage of the world's events. And yeah, looking forward to the future.
Indeed.
Bye.
Good night. Stay safe.